he gets on it too.
Oh, it's okay.
Chicago Sting. Very nice.
Okay.
I'm a professional. I have a microphone.
Oh my God! Can we get 2 of those? Can we get one?
Sure.
Can we
can
we write it off?
You guys abandoned. Is that a beer?
It is a hot day. I worked out this morning really well. And I also told Steve, I was like, this is very informal. I said it's called Shootin' the Shot, so feel free to pour yourself a beer. Welcome to Shootin' the Shot with yours truly, 15-year MLS veteran and defender for Los Angeles Football Club, Jordan Harvey. And I'm teaming up with co-host, LAFC's very own Executive Vice President, Chief Business Officer, Larry Friedman. And today we are shooting the shot with Steve Nash, 2-time NBA MVP, Hall of Famer. It doesn't get much better than this. What do you think, Larry?
No, this is the first one where, for as big a star as Will Ferrell obviously is, as big a star as Carlos Vela actually is, I'm fortunate that I know each of them at least a little bit, so I wasn't awestruck. Today, we go fanboy.
I'm going to try to hold back on that, obviously. To Carlos's point, the more normal you act with people, yes, I think the more normal of a response you'll get. So hopefully we have a good enough relationship that this goes smoothly and I don't fanboy out at some point, but it's inevitable, I think.
We'll just have to use the Canadian vernacular, take off, poser.
Apologize a lot.
Exactly.
There we go. Steve.
Sideways Steve.
How we doing? Sorry. How's that?
Worries. Yeah, great. First off, I want to give you a little bit of insight. I know it's a new podcast, but we have been coming out with a bang, and we had Will on, the first guest. We just had Carlos, and Larry and I are in a little bit of a competition here. So thankfully you're on, and I'm like pulling through right now and in the lead. So much appreciated. Larry, you got to come up with the next guest now.
Yeah, no, Steve, I am personally blown away by this because whether it was Jordan pulling Carlos or me pulling Will Ferrell, I knew both of those guys. This is, I am in the presence of a true legend, and I don't know if I can keep my composure.
It's my pleasure to meet you, and happy to take part.
Great to meet you too. And just because I know we're going to be talking a little bit of old and current Vancouver Whitecaps, I'm throwing it back to North American Soccer League, Chicago Sting. Way back in the day, we were actually season ticket holders.
Is that right?
Yeah. And I looked up, for sake of conversation, a couple of the people who played back on the Whitecaps in the 81 season, which was the year my Chicago Sting won the Soccer Bowl. And you might have been old enough, Steve, to be a Whitecaps fan at the time. And they had ex-West Ham superstar Alan Taylor, a gentleman by the name of David Harvey, who I'm sure at some point is related to Jordan Harvey, the great Bob Leonarduzzi, who went on to be involved with the Canadian national team.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Was Carl Valentine on that team?
Yes, he was.
Legend.
Look at that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was a Caps. I'm the same age as the Caps. So both myself and the Caps are 1974. And, obviously I was probably 5 or 6 when I got into it a little bit. And, maybe even earlier, but, I don't really remember any of it. But I do remember Carl and Bobby just because they stuck around. So they were always kind of there through my, my childhood and teenage years and still there today. So those guys are definitely staples in Vancouver. And I still remember vaguely, I know the history, but I still remember vaguely the year that we won the Soccer Bowl. I think it was 79. But yeah, this last season, the Caps had gear out called the Village. Did you see some of that stuff? Do you know the story behind that?
I know it was, in paying homage to the 79 winners, the championship winners. And I was going to touch on that a little bit with a little bit of a segment that we have. But, I mean, what'd you think of those jerseys?
Well, I love the old school Caps jerseys with the stripes, the across. Those are great. But the Village gear is an inside joke in Vancouver because I think we beat the New York Cosmos in the final in '79, and let's say it was on ABC, like Wide World of Sports, whatever. And the announcer, comes into the broadcast and is like, from a little village on the west coast of Canada, the Vancouver Whitecaps. So Vancouver to this day, that we've held on to that. With our pettiness runs high. We held on to it. We have gear in 2019 reminding everyone that we are not a village. But awesome history and memory, and we can laugh at ourselves up there for sure. So it was cool to see that come out, and nobody really knew, I think, except for us old timers.
Vancouver's been creative with a lot of stuff from their. I mean, I've only been paying attention since the MLS years, but they've come up with some crazy jerseys, and I'm just gonna get this one. Just started out with a bang.
Oh, there.
And we did it with Will in his movies. So we did it was start, cut, bench, and you have to. There's three options, and you have to do it. And we did with him the Elf, Ron Burgundy, and Ricky Bobby, and he cut the Elf. Believe it or not, started Ron Burgundy and benched Ricky Bobby, which I don't think he'd do well on the bench. But with you, I wanted to do, and it's funny that you brought up the Village and the apparel and stuff, but I wanted to do the Caps jerseys.
All right.
And I'll answer it as well. But between the Arbutus Brown, it's Arbutus Brown, correct? I mean, I can make this stuff up. I wore it. And Arbutus Brown, the paying homage, the latest one, the latest white kit, I believe it's with the collar and everything, and then the rain jerseys where it's the upside down triangles that resemble rain, and obviously there's a lot of rain in Vancouver, so between those three jerseys. And you can give a slight explanation. You don't have to go too deep into it. But what would you start, cut, and bench?
I think I'd cut the Arbutus Brown, personally.
What's crazy is that has like a weird cult following. Like people love it. People love that.
I think though, like if you're a diehard fan, you're going to gravitate towards your club doing things that you may never see again, and like you're going to hold on to that, whether it's because you genuinely love it, you love the the one-off nature of it, or because it's just your club and you're never going to see it again. So I can see it having a cult following, but I think as far as like mass appeal, I that one probably, I don't know, doesn't mean as much to me. I mean, I'd probably do the rain as far as bench, and then I would keep if it's the one you're talking about with the collar that has the stripe across with the let's say it's a white jersey with the blue and then the red trim. Is that the one we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean they only got to play a couple games with it before we all went into quarantine, but yes, that one.
I love those old striped edition. I should do a real deep dive on the jerseys because I don't know if they how much they changed them. Like if they were very similar, if there was one that actually had the collar, and then they had one that didn't maybe have the collar. I know the old school ones had the collar.
I mean, I'm not far off. I think the Arbutus Brown has to go, and the collar I would probably bench just because for me, I'm just
you just don't like the collar.
No, I don't like the collar.
I mean,
and the stripe. If you're going to wear it on the field, the stripe is just going to make you look thick, right? So the raindrops.
Sentimentally, sentimentally, the stripe is the shit to me.
Yeah.
I mean, when I see that, I'm like, that is the coolest jersey ever. But I can see how if I had to wear it on the field, and the collar, it reminds me of those old Admiral kits. I wonder if it was an Admiral.
Yeah,
kit,
yeah. Oh yeah, it might have been.
From the old days. But
the 79 team was sponsored by Admiral probably. What is your favorite Suns kit? Because I back when eBay was like the thing, not joking whatsoever, I bought a Steve Nash Suns kit jersey, the all black with the ball kind of coming across. Yeah. Similar to the stripe. I don't know if it's on fire or what. Yeah. But that was my go-to jersey. What is your favorite Suns jersey?
I think that's right up there for sure. I think that was the jersey my rookie year. And God, I'm the worst at this. Like it all blends into one. But I think that was my rookie year, and I think they brought him back. My rookie year would have been 24 years ago. So I think they brought him back, and now those are the ones that you get on like that I think that's the one, or one of the main ones that like Mitchell and Ness brought back.
Yeah,
that edition. That's I like that one. It kind of covers all the bases. I kind of like the old one too that has like it just has Phoenix across it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we probably played some games in that, but that was like a special edition from like way back when they played in the old arena. I think it was called the Coliseum. Back in those Suns days, would have been like the Van Arsdales and Paul Westphal and that
Connie Hawkins.
That crew. Connie Hawkins for sure, legend.
Charlie Scott.
Well, I got to know Charlie Scott and his story recently. This is super name drop, but like I didn't know a lot about him. We were in the same Hall of Fame class, so here humble brag, but he like amazing story. The first African American player in North Carolina, I think. And just like an incredible history and past that, because there's been so many great basketball players, sometimes you don't realize, how deep the history runs. And so I got to know more of his story. And that was pretty cool. So that Suns teams, that era with that, with that just Phoenix across. And I wish I could tell you the font, but it's kind of a cool old school font. And those are definitely the classics.
Speaking of, I think you're going to go here, but speaking of the early days with the Suns, those first couple years you were on the Suns were the Chicago Bulls, which I'll let Larry take this because he's the Chicago guy.
Well, before we go there, I'm curious about, and first of all, it's been a good 30 years since anybody's dropped a Dick Van Arsdale or a Tom Van Arsdale in a conversation with me. So that's amazing.
They deserve a little respect,
Yeah. It's incredible in retrospect. After the career you had and all of the accolades and records and whatnot, to think that in those first 2 years, you weren't a starter.
Yeah. No, I mean, for sure. I mean, I was a one scholarship offer kid, so I had only one scholarship offer at Santa Clara, and luckily it all worked out. But, I was a late bloomer. I didn't really start playing basketball until 8th grade, 13 years old. So it was a bit of a different path for me. I played all the other sports growing up, and when I went to the 8th grade at a new school, all the kind of jocks that were out playing sports that were basketball fanatics playing ball. So I wanted to be out playing something. So I was playing with them and very timely with the latest film, The Last Dance. It was exactly the same time as Michael Jordan kind of burst onto the scene, and the Air Jordan 1s and commercials with Spike Lee. And so it was a super fun, exciting time to get pulled into the game. And, I took off from there, loved it, obsessed with it, played it every day, and, had to work my way up and was, nowadays it's unheard of, but, I graduated from college when I got drafted. I played all 4 years. So it took me a little while to kind of, catch up to the pack, but eventually got there.
So you mentioned the Air Jordans, and that's where this Jordan thought I was going to go, but everybody's buzzing And I'm especially buzzing as a guy who lived in Chicago through the era about The Last Dance. And your first couple of years in the league were during that very time, and you had the opportunity to play against those teams as well as to come in as a visitor at the United Center and have that experience. So curious if you have any reflections on all of that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, watching the first couple episodes of the film, took me right back to being a teenager. Because although I did get to play against them, much of that of Michael Jordan's era and career, I was a teenager, 13 to 22 when I entered the league. Was the first part of his career, and idolized him. I mean, he was my hero, and it just takes you right back to the feelings you had as a kid and how different the time was. Because nowadays you have so much access on your phone. You can see every highlight, every clip, whether it's on Instagram or YouTube, of any player, any game you ever want to see. But back then, you didn't have access like that. So, players didn't have their own accounts to broadcast from, let alone did they do a good job of getting behind the scenes. And Michael was although he had big endorsements, you didn't get a ton of access to Michael. So, and that was normal. We didn't know any better. And so, but to transport yourself back there with the film and realize this, I felt like a kid, felt so excited. I felt like I idolized him all over again watching the film at 46 years old. It's incredible because obviously it's unprecedented access, but that nostalgic feeling of going back and remembering how you feel. I think the point I wanted to make is that MJ was must-see TV. Nowadays, every game's broadcasted. You can see everything. You can go and see what LeBron's doing today on his social media stuff. Back then, that was all you got. Just tune into a game if you wanted to see MJ, and he was just so charismatic and beautiful to watch and a killer. And you just knew every time you tuned in, it was going to be, unforgettable. And so for me, the film was incredible. And then getting a chance to play against them was bizarre. My rookie year, we played the Bulls twice in my first 2.5, 3 weeks of the season. That's it. That was it for the whole year, but it happened right away. And I remember we played them in Chicago, and Chucky Brown was my teammate, and he gets on the bus with Jordan's shoes. And I was like, this is my hero. I was like, how are those Jordan shoes? He's like, yeah. I was like, how'd you get, a little kid, how'd you get those? He's like, I asked him for them. I was like, you could do that? And he was like, yeah. He's like, so we played them in Phoenix 2 weeks later. And I actually posted a picture on Instagram before The Last Dance, me and Michael having a laugh during that game. And the story goes, I got switched off onto him, and he kind of took me in the post, did his little fadeaway, scored, went down the other end. Someone got fouled. They're shooting free throws. I'm standing behind the free throw shooter, outside the key there. And he walks up to me, and he's like, "You were at a slight disadvantage." and I was laughing. As the picture shows, we were both kind of having a laugh. And I laughed, and then I said, "Can I get your shoes after the game?" And he's like, "Yeah, no problem." So I sent one of the ball kids down, and he gave me his shoes, but they weren't signed, and I wanted them signed. So I was in the parking lot, the player parking area where the opposing team buses. He walks out, I see him, I get him to sign the shoes like a little kid. And I know I had at least one teammate, Rex Chapman, who was like, "What the is he doing right now?" He's like my vet, my super close with him, but almost kind of pissed at me, but unbelievable. Wouldn't change it for the world. Those shoes are still at my mom and dad's house. And it was, incredible story to think back to how far, the way life twists and turns, and to look back on that now with the release of this film is incredible.
One other basketball question from me. And you mentioned how beautiful Jordan was to watch play. The same could be said for you. An incredibly fundamentally sound player, elegant in performance, one of the greatest free throw shooters ever to play the game. And I don't know if the stats are up to date, but what I saw was Steph Curry has you by like 0.1% at this point. So that story still remains to be told in full. But what was it like to play with a guy like Shaquille O'Neal, who, you know, just couldn't make free throws to save his life? Did you try and help him?
Not really. I mean, on the free throw stuff, you know, everyone had tried to help him, you know, and I would have been happy to help, but you know, I think he'd seen it and heard it all before. And I think in a sense, he just wanted to avoid that whole thing. You know, and it's also like, I think physiologically and like biomechanics and the size of his hands and like maybe his shoulder mobility, it wasn't easy for him. I don't think. I think that caused him a lot of problems. But playing with Shaq was, you know, was a riot. I mean, he's hilarious, and so many fun days. You know, because he's larger than life. You know, I mean, we know how big he is, but I mean, he really is larger than life with his personality and you know, sense of humor and charisma, and you know, never let the truth get in the way of a good story, I think is one of his mottos. So he always had our locker room dying laughing, and it was an incredible experience to be around him day to day for a year.
You talked about how your parents are back home, I'm assuming in Vancouver or British Columbia?
Victoria, yeah, on the island.
Victoria, okay. I wanted to talk about, I mean, you just said that you didn't start playing basketball until 8th grade, which I find crazy given kind of your fundamentals in the game. That just shows that you worked super hard. But how much of an influence, and I can talk a little bit about it because I've played pickup with you or five-a-side like way back in the day, but like how much of your fundamentals and your basketball game was shaped by soccer?
You know, I've said it a lot that I think, you know, I probably wouldn't have made the NBA if it wasn't for soccer. I mean, I think all the sports helped me, but soccer was the most pivotal. You know, my dad played professional soccer. I mean, it's called semi-pro. He played in the first division in South Africa. I played in the conference in the UK. You know, grew up inner city London and he went to an inner city school in London where every player on his high school team signed with pro forms to play with a professional team. And he was 5'3" when he graduated. And so he was just too small. And then, you know, because he graduated like 16 in the UK. And by the time he was 18, he was 5'10" and went on to play semi-pro, pro football. But, you know, he kind of missed it in a sense of the way the path went. But just, you know, total football man, loves the sport. And so I grew up playing all the other sports. But I think just having a dad that loved the nuance of the game, the creativity, he applauded you for being witty or clever, you know, having vision and anticipation. And so, like, if I scored 3 goals in a soccer game, when we get in the car, he was never like, 3 goals, that's way to go, that's great, like you would expect a dad. He'd be like, remember that time you could have scored, you drew the defense, you slid it across to your teammate? He was like, that was brilliant, you know? So those were the types of like reward system that I had, even in the backyard playing with him and my brother. It was about deceiving and skill and, like I said, anticipation, vision, creativity. So I think that would like set the stage in every sport, you know, soccer, hockey, baseball, eventually basketball, like to think and be creative and all those things. And so that, and coupled with just the footwork, balance, coordination, timing, rhythm, you know, I think so many of those tools that I had to use because I didn't have the explosiveness or size, strength that a lot of my opponents had, you know, those things are so pivotal for me. And I think they were born on the soccer field. And if it wasn't for soccer and that anticipation, and I always say, like, as a little anecdote, you know, in soccer, you've always got to have your head on a swivel and be thinking before the ball comes to you. And so I think that anticipation, that reading, seeing the spaces and angles and having options in your head before you receive the ball, and then finding solutions. You know, in football, you can only use your feet. And whether you've got to like chip it or bend it or slide it in a gap or drive it or whatever it is. You have to think ahead, but then you also have to find a solution for the situation. And so I think that way of thinking really gave me a big advantage when it came to basketball, that other kids that had just played basketball or maybe didn't have a dad that kind of, valued those type of things, maybe they never caught on to that way of thinking in a sense. And it gave me an advantage, whereas most of the other metrics that you would measure a potential NBA player from, I was not on the radar. So I think it was incredibly impressionable, impactful, and important for me that I did play soccer so religiously, until I was 13.
Yeah, I mean, those are the nuances of the game that, sometimes players don't pick up until later in their career, or, coaches don't necessarily see or stress very often. I know with LAFC, those are the little things that are stressed each and every day. And we have such young players that are impressionable that take that on like a sponge and, have success. But, the fact that your dad's doing that at such a young age, that sets you up for success. And that's amazing that you had someone kind of in your corner, giving you that insight before, at such a young age, that I feel like I never got that until maybe higher leagues or more competitive stuff. So, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel lucky. I mean, if like we were playing, me and my brother were playing against my dad in the backyard, and you could play a 1-2 around him, he'd let you play a 1-2. You look your brother off and try to dribble him, he'd kick you. So it was like it was very obvious what was valued in our backyard.
Well, I'm sure that helped you, driving down the lane with the 7-footers. Took you back to the soccer field and your dad taking you out.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, you're an owner. I'm sure everybody knows, an owner of the Whitecaps and an owner of Mallorca, which is awesome. And I've followed, kind of through you and your social media, the path that they have taken. And you became an owner when they were in 3rd division, and they've worked their way up. And I want to take you to and get some insight into your head. Obviously, you're going nuts, but that playoff game that took them to La Liga. I mean, what is going through your head? You got in on this team when they're in the 3rd division, and they made their way up, and you were with them. I mean, relatively short period of time to get them back into the La Liga, 2 promotions. Sure. What's going through your head with them in that game in particular?
Well, the game was a dream. I mean, the whole thing's been a dream in many respects. We didn't realize that we were missing a trick here was culture and character of the players we recruit and sign. And so we emphasized that from day one, but it became like it gave us a real reason and it gave us an emphasis or a demonstrative way to emphasize that look, this is the reason we didn't succeed. You can't say we didn't have a good squad. We just didn't have the character or the culture. And we went through a few coaches, and I think we had some players that perhaps weren't as professional as they needed to be at the time. Very, very qualified players for the division, but we went down. So we went down to the 3rd division. And in Spain, the 3rd division is 80 teams. It's kind of like the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th divisions all rolled into one. There's 80 teams, 4 regions, and we had to try to come right back up because you get down there and things don't go well. I think I can't remember. I think the term they call it is like the well. You can get stuck down there and it becomes very difficult. And we're not a huge club, but we're a club that should be in and around La Liga. So the next year, we thought, let's solidify. We've gone down. We're scarred from going down. We found ourselves going back up. Let's solidify it. So we started to try to build character and chemistry and identifying our players and our processes. And, along the way, we had a lot of luck. We paid 2nd division players to stay and play in the 3rd division. So that gave us an advantage and we took it. We brought in a coach when we went down to the 3rd division with a lot of experience getting teams up. He was, he's in his mid-40s, so he's a relatively young coach, had some really good experiences in 2nd and 3rd division, played in the Liga. But what we thought of him, it came true and then some. You know, he's been fantastic as far as his character, his relating to the players, the seriousness, the players respect him, the training, all the things that I know you can relate to at LAFC that keep an energy and a vibe, confidence, but also an expectation every day on the way you behave and train. And here we are getting close to the end of the year. It's like, are we really going to make the playoffs? You know, me and Stu Holden, who's part of our group, a close buddy of mine, are like, you know, watching all the games or as many as we can. And, you know, is this like, you know, having these little dreams and aspirations, like, is this really going to happen? Are we going to have a playoff? And so eventually we make the playoff. We win the first, we played Deportivo La Coruña, I think, in the playoff. It's all a blur now.
Yeah.
And we go to their place, you know, big, massive club, and we lose 2-0. And one of our guys, he just made a big error. He slid in and it was a little wet, and he made a mess of it. And he didn't mean to, but he ended up getting his studs. They both went to ground and he missed everything. And he's like, I think his studs went through a guy's face. The guy went to the hospital. He gets sent off. And from a game that we started really well on the road, we lose 2-0 down in there. So we go home, you know, down 2 goals. But as you know, like it's a lot of pressure to have a 2-goal lead on the road. Because what do? Do you go for it and give up a goal, or do you sit back and absorb pressure for 90 minutes? So
we just had the Lyon game in our Champions League where we came back from the same deficit. And yeah, I mean, and to your point, on the flip side of that, as a team that's down 2-0, you're just like, let's go for it. Just, you know, throw caution to the wind, push forward. And usually that's your best defense is just pushing forward and being a good offense. So, yeah, absolutely.
And as you know, when you push, the tendency for the team holding on is to drop deeper and deeper and deeper, you know. It's not like, let's throw it back down their throat. You're thinking, hang on here. We can't give up a goal. If we give up a goal, now the pressure's really on, right? And so they sit back. They played really tight. And in the end, we scored 3 golazos, like just 3 beautiful goals. It was obviously a really special day. And our keeper, they tried to push a little bit at the end. Our keeper made a 50 million euro save at the end.
Did you show him that bonus?
It was magic, man. I mean, you have to give luck some credit or allow it to figure in, because it is so difficult. As you know, I mean, you never know. Like, one bounce goes this way or the other, and you lose. And does that mean that everything you did was wrong? You know, but you have to start all over. And so, you know, luck has to play a big part in all these promotions and even relegations. And so, but there we were, unbelievable feeling. My wife and I were due with our youngest about a week or 2 after the game, so we couldn't go. And Stu had to broadcast. He had to work, so he couldn't go. So we were watching it at a pub on Hermosa Pier with a bunch of friends, and I mean, the energy was just unbelievable, and we had an incredible, unforgettable day. But now here we are now, tied for 3rd from bottom, but in the relegation zone on point difference. And now who knows? You know,
now
who knows if we'll play the season out, or if we'll be in La Liga next year, or who knows what direction they'll go or what's going to happen. So we've had an incredible experience, but we still got to grow a long ways as a club.
But to your credit, focusing on culture, I think, you said luck, but I think in those difficult times when you're down 2-0, your back's against the wall, when you have a good culture and you have the right guys, within a team that can hold them together and make that push, that makes a world of a difference and gives you that luck. And I know you're a huge proponent of teaching resilience. I've heard you say it a bunch of times on different podcasts. Yes. And, you have to go through adversity to kind of deal with resilience. But, through the Whitecaps, Mallorca, and what other avenues are you trying to teach that? Because I think it's just amazing, and it's difficult to teach. I've heard you explain it a little bit, but I was hoping you could enlighten us.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's undertaught. I think it's one of those things that we say, how do you teach that? But if you think about it, like old school coaches, you were allowed to be a lot more demanding back in the old days. Nowadays, our generation as parents, we don't allow coaches to MF our kids and
It's
be tough on
managing.
them.
It's managing, right?
It is. It is. Whereas if I came home and told my dad my high school coach MF'd me, he'd say, "What'd you do?" He'd be on me. He'd be mad at me. Like, you probably deserved it. What'd you do?
Trust me, we're dealing with that right now in quarantine.
Yeah. Exactly. Whereas, nowadays, you can't, if you did that, heavy odds, someone's down the school talking to the principal. And so I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying that in the old days, that was a big art. The coaching was being tough on people and allowing them to gain that toughness and resilience and to be able to handle pressure.
Or just weeding out some of the guys who can't handle it, right?
Sure.
And that's like a ripping a Band-Aid off way of doing it back in the day. And I know you're approaching it a little different.
Yeah. So I think the way that I'd like to approach it, and the way I've talked to our group at Mallorca about it, is that given the language barrier, though, I think it should be taught like as the grit muscle. So you explain to our 8, 9, 10-year-olds what it is. You explain to them that the best players in the world, they make it not because of their talent, not because of their physicality or their skill or vision. They make it because they're the most resilient. Because there's, especially in football, there are hundreds of thousands of super talented football players all around the world that never made it, right? And the ones that make it are the ones that can persevere day in, day out, and come back the next day and be there early and be accountable even after they've taken their lumps or had a bad week or day or year or whatever it is. The ones that hang around, stick around because they're resilient. I read a book about Barcelona, and they were saying the number one factor in the kids that make it from La Masia, their academy, to the first team is resilience. That's it. It's not, technical ability or athleticism. Those things are factors, but the ones that make it all have the resilience to stay with it and to persevere and to outlast the other kids. So I think it's a thing of educating these kids, making them aware, like, this is great. You have great technical ability. You're a good little athlete. You have a big impact on our team. But just so you know, the way to make it all the way to the first team is to be resilient. So let's try to work on that as though it's a muscle, right? We work on your heart muscle and your lungs. We work on, your legs and whatever it may be in the gym or in training or in conditioning. Well, this is a muscle we want to train too. Okay, you understand? Great. All right. So next time I come up to you and ask you how you're doing with the grip muscle, I want you to understand where I'm coming across, what I'm trying to tell you, and where we're going. This is a very rudimentary, broad strokes way of teaching it. But so then 2 weeks later, when the kid starts pointing fingers in a drill or is upset with a referee's decision in a scrimmage, or throws his hands up when a player doesn't pass him the ball, the coach puts his arm around him after training and says, "How'd you do today?" And the kid's like, "Good." And he's like, "How'd you think the grip muscle did today?" "Good." He's like, "What about the drill, where you didn't get the ball to feet and you threw your hands up in the air and were upset at your teammate? How'd you think you did there?" Right? And then now you have a conversation going where the kid's identified an example. He's been told what it is. He's been identified as an example. And he said, "Okay, so in the next time you're in that situation, you're frustrated, you're gonna let's resolve it in a different way. Let's work harder. Let's encourage our teammates. Let's pull them aside later and be like, when I come short for it, try to get into me, finding different solutions that are more resilient." So I do think it's underappreciated as a teaching opportunity. And then there's ways that you can manufacture it as well.
I mean, you could even say that, I'm getting older, and so I always think that younger kids like have it on a platter. But in this day and age, these kids just, they have so much at their fingertips that they just want it instantly, and they don't necessarily go through the proper steps, go through the adversity, go to build their resilience to get it. And so, in this kind of era, it's almost more difficult for them to build that. And the fact that you're identifying that as a main thing, along with, the things that you grew up with and the nuances of different, of the game. I think that's huge. I think it's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's a different era. The kids have so much more access now. They're so much closer. Like we talked about with Jordan, he just seems so far away, when I was a kid. But nowadays, you have so much access. Whether it's Carlos Vela or whoever it is, like a kid in your academy or in and around like the ODP or something, they can see his Instagram. They probably seen him train at some point or seen enough clips that they almost feel like they know the guy, So when they come around him, it's not always quite this massive leap, right? Whereas, when I came in the league, I was on Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson's show yesterday, and we were talking about like the difference when we came in the league. It didn't matter how good you were. Like if there was a veteran in your position older than you, you had to earn it. You had to take it, and they would make you earn it. I remember AC Green was my vet, who I love to death. He, at the end of every practice, he'd take all the balls, kick them all over the arena or practice court, wherever we were, and be like, go get them, Rook. Like nowadays that never happened, right? Like it's not even a part. And I'm not saying that that's right. It's just a difference in that, like in a way, that afforded me something, right? That afforded me like humble, resilience, hardworking, like all those things that I needed to raise my game. I couldn't take any of those for granted, because if I for 1 second thought I'd arrived, those vets were going to shit all over me. And they're going to put me right back in my place. And so that environment, I think, makes you tougher, makes you more resilient, makes you, realize every day that you have to earn it in practice. You can't just like float on talent, ability, or reputation.
Yeah, and that goes along with what you just mentioned, is like having someone to compete with in your position. You said your rookie year, you were competing with some veterans. I think every single year of my career, I've had to compete with somebody, whether it be a young guy now, or competing with an older guy when I was first coming on. You have to beat someone out almost to earn that spot and to earn your kind of career going forward. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
Steve, you mentioned having a little bit of luck, and that leads to asking about how you came to the number 13. And, and then ultimately the transition and homage that was number 10 when you played here with the Lakers.
Yeah. Well, 13, when I went, I wore 11 at Santa Clara. And when I came to the Suns, Wesley Person wore 11. So I had to pick a new number. And
was that 11? Was that soccer related?
No, it wasn't. I think Isaiah Thomas was my hero. Michael was my hero. Isaiah, however you want to phrase it, was who I wanted to emulate, who I wanted to be like, because I was never going to be like Mike. So that was a part of it for sure. But I had to pick a new number. My best friend in high school was 13 on our high school team. So I wore 13, chose 13 for him. And yeah, I don't know. It was as simple as that, and stuck with it obviously all the way to the Lakers. And I think it's Wilt wore 13 for the Lakers. So Chamberlain. So I had to pick a new number. And so as just as a soccer lunatic, number 10 playmaker, definitely an homage to all those great playmakers that I idolized in soccer.
With that move to LA, and then now you kind of settling here, is that something you always thought about, coming to LA, settling here? And then obviously now an analyst for Champions League and doing media out here. Is that something you always wanted to do?
I didn't always want to do media. I didn't know that was going to happen. And frankly, I think I started doing it just because it was such a unique opportunity to do football.
And you're good at that, right?
Thanks. I don't know. I'm a work in progress and a rookie at that, and have enjoyed the opportunity to cover a game that I'm just, obsessed with and passionate about. But that was never in the plan. It was really just a unique opportunity that I didn't want to turn my back on. Similar to getting involved with Mallorca or the Whitecaps or whatever it may be. It's like these opportunities come along that, you maybe didn't plan for or envision, but they're too good to pass up. And that was one of them. But I always did want to live in Southern California. Beautiful, it speaks for itself, beautiful part of the world, whether it's North County, San Diego, or the South Bay here, or so many. You could go, we could do the top 150 spots in California and have no problem. So always wanted to live here, and, just thankful the way it worked out. Then I got a chance to play here for a little bit, although it was difficult, got hurt, and never was the same. It still was a pleasure to play here in my career, and also to call this home. And my kids, this is for the most part all they know.
Do you have a couple of dual citizens in the house? My daughter, my oldest daughter is a dual citizen. So we got her in the Canadian. She'll be going to UBC.
Smart. She'll have to be smart to get into UBC.
Yeah.
Speaking of Canada, curious about your membership in the Order of Canada. Learned through some dealings in a past life in the world of baseball and trying to bring baseball back to Montreal. Worked on that project with a couple of gentlemen who were Order of Canada, had the lapel pin, and learned that it is not something that you can ask for. It comes to you. So curious about when that happened for you and how it came about.
Have you ever been asked this question, by the way?
It's a little awkward.
It's one of those secret societies you don't talk about.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I think what happened is like someone got in touch with my dad and, said that I'd been, whatever, nominated or even was awarded the Order of Canada, and can I make the ceremony? Because you have to make the ceremony to get the award. And I'm embarrassed to say, because it is a huge honor, and I'm honored, thrilled, humbled, all those things. But I'm not a big awards guy, and so it did take a few years to be able to go to the ceremony and experience it. Well worth it. As much as anything, to be recognized by your country like that, and also the other inductees, just incredible to be a part of that group. But it's not, it's like it's a huge throw. It's not the type of thing I love to lead with,
Shift from there to, let's call it Canadian pop culture. And I'm just going to throw out a few things and you can pick or choose.
Justin Bieber.
No, come on, man.
I don't know. I just didn't know where you're going with that.
No. I'm curious about Hockey Night in Canada, Don Cherry, two of the loudest three-man rock and roll bands in the history of rock and roll, Triumph and Rush, and then Second City, Bob and Doug McKenzie, Take Off, and all that good stuff. Any of that resonate with you, Steve Nash?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Bob and Doug McKenzie is a staple to all Canadian kids. The bands were a little before me, so I was totally aware of them. But
same here.
Yeah, well, I didn't maybe I wasn't as into music at that age, but also I didn't have older brothers and sisters, and I think I am just a little young for when they were at their peak. But definitely know they kind of hit that, how important they were or influential they were. What was the other one you mentioned?
Hockey Night in Canada. Don Cherry, man.
That was a staple for me growing up. Similar like we said with Jordan. You just didn't get you got Canucks games in Victoria, but Hockey Night in Canada was must see TV, and that was just a staple. The whole country watching it. You felt like a connection to your country every Saturday night because everyone was watching it and everyone was watching Don Cherry, and that's just a part of my childhood. That is a fabric of it. I don't want to date myself too much, but I think the way people talk about Ed Sullivan or Johnny Carson or things like that. But this is just Saturday night, and the music dun, 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 dun. I mean, that was
it's similar, and I don't think Harvey's old enough, but you actually mentioned it a bit earlier in this discussion. ABC Wide World of Sports on Saturday afternoon. If you were a sports kid, you watched that show, and it didn't matter if it was bowling or a rodeo or Irish curling, hurling, whatever it is. You watch that show.
Yeah, it's similar. I mean, back then, those two games on a Saturday night, I think it was two games, on East Coast and West Coast or something like that. It just felt so huge, and I'm sure the numbers would indicate that because there was so many lack of options in those days. But definitely that one, was huge in my childhood. And I played hockey from, till I was about 12 or 13 when I started playing basketball, loved it. So Hockey Night in Canada was big time. And I idolized Wayne Gretzky, and he was at his prime, through that for my whole childhood. And that one strikes a chord for sure.
And how does a Steve Nash end up with an honorary Doctor of Laws from the University of Victoria?
The honorary degree. So I took the honorary degree from the University of Victoria because that's where I'm from. But it's the weirdest thing. Like I think, and this is going to sound rude, but you make enough buckets or assists, you get offered a bunch of honorary degrees. And I'm like, I just said,
pretty sure like Shaq has one too, I think.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, I just was like, it's just a funny game. You're like, you know what? I'm only doing Victoria because you run around the country. I could have 50 degrees in my briefcase, all of which mean absolutely nothing. So, I hope that didn't sound arrogant.
Did you pick law, or did they offer you that?
No, they offered. I mean, I think they could tell. You know, they could tell how well read I am, how well I write, argumentative, persuasive. You know, I think
Larry brings it up because he's just jealous that it was handed to you and he had to work for everything.
Yeah, I had 3 years of my life. I can't get those back.
Yeah, you know, I never flipped a page, Larry. Sorry to tell you.
What are you guys doing in your house, given the quarantine and everything? Are you guys going nuts like us, or are you guys holding up?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to open a bottle of wine by 4:35 every night. But we
go the drink, Harvey.
Yeah, we're trying.
I mean, you get the workout in the morning, and then you know you deal with the family throughout with the schoolwork and the trying to get her busy or tired out, and then by the end of it, you're just like, oh man, I need a break, right?
Well, let me this is not a brag, but we have 5 kids in the house. So we have 3 homeschooling and then 2 babies, and the twin girls that are 15. So you got 2 teenage girls. You got a 9-year-old boy who's absolutely bouncing off the walls, and then you have a 2.5-year-old boy bouncing off the walls, and a baby girl. And the 2 youngest ones need to be man marked. So what is this? We're on to week 6 right now of like just wall to wall kids, homeschool, diapers, energy out. So I have to say, 75% of the time this has been and let's first say, obviously it's inappropriate not to look at all the devastation and the danger and the precautions we have to take. But on the positive side for our family, getting to spend 2 or 3 hours with your teenage daughters every day is something that I wasn't quite sure would happen. Every week they seem to be more and more mature and in their own world. And so the fact that we've always had a great relationship, but over these 5-6 weeks we spent so much time together has been unbelievable. And then there's 25% where you want to jump out a window if that glass of wine isn't big enough. So we're managing and we're making the most of it, and we're looking at it as a positive thing for the most part.
Harvey, I want you to take note, as a guy who just had his 2nd child, that Steve made mention of no longer being able to man mark each of his children. It's zone defense.
I'm well aware.
So just keep that in mind.
And we still are able to do that, and still, when this is all said and done, get a table for 4. But I just, for me, it's kind of the constant, right? Just trying to figure out ideas to just wear them out a little bit.
Yours are little still.
Any words of advice?
No, you're doing fine. I mean, you had no problem man marking me in caps training, so you'd be fine.
You know what?
Do you remember that one in BC Place, that training session I took part in?
I remember a few different ones that was like some of the highlights of those, like that 2011 season. We didn't have a lot of highlights, but you coming out and training with us was one of them. And I just remember, you were still playing at the time, basketball. And so we'd play like 5-a-side. And I just remember you defending as if it was like a half court defense. And you were like the point up top of the key, and just kind of hands down and like side shuffling. And we'd be like, this is awesome. This is amazing. Like as if we were playing basketball, but it was great. And everybody, I think the expectations of any owner coming out and training are pretty low. So like you coming out there and like showing your skill, and I saw a little bit, a clip of you at BC Place, and your first touch is getting better and better. But like you coming out there, everybody's like, oh my God, he can play. He can play.
Yeah,
So
nice.
yeah, no, we love it. We
Thanks.
loved it, and I'm sure they still do. And everybody appreciates having you around. I know that for a fact. And you know, you come and speak to us, and you know, during whether it be playoff runs or whatever, and everybody appreciated it. So we thank you so much.
That's nice of you to say. It's super fun. I unfortunately for the I make more LAFC games obviously now than I do Whitecaps games, but you know, it's tricky with 5 kids getting up there, but it's so much fun to watch all the games at home, and the league just keeps getting better and better, and the owners are becoming more and more invested, and it's the level's grown, the competitive nature's grown, and it's a pleasure to be in for the last 10 years now.
Before we get to the very last segment, and thank you for taking all the time today. Have you been to Banc of California Stadium?
Yeah, of course. I've been 4 or 5 times.
Your thoughts on the in-venue experience and the 3252?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's been said rightfully a lot. It's unbelievable. I mean, to not only to have that type of building, but atmosphere, supporters section and club, but to nail it from day one it's. I mean, I don't even quite understand what it took to do that. It's such a big staple for the league now and a model for the league. But as a fan, to go into that building and to experience it is just incredible as an entertainment experience, but also incredible as a representation of the game and the league. So bravo to everyone involved, and that's what everyone's aspiring to be like.
You know, on the other side of this, which is hopefully sooner rather than later, you know where to find us, and we'd love to host you and the whole fam.
Thank you.
But it's a bit of a tradition, to the extent you can have a tradition on a podcast, video cast that is
with the third guest,
third
too.
episode.
Yeah.
We're making traditions.
Exactly. So our good friend Will Ferrell was kind enough to sing a couple of bars of Dust in the Wind, which of course he sang in Old School at Blues Funeral. Then Jordan and Carlos Vela did a little bit of a duet on Suavemente. And in learning a little bit more than I already knew about Steve Nash online, there was some video with the Lionel Richie song All Night Long. And Harvey learned it on guitar. And if you're willing, maybe one chorus.
Yeah, let's give it a shot. It's been a while, but I have a special technique. I have a special technique for the chorus.
Here we go. All night long,
all night,
all night long,
all night,
all night long,
all night,
all night long,
all night.
Amazing.
Shout out to Leandro Barbosa, who taught me that little technique. That was how you'd like to sing those reverberations. Hi there.
It took you to the next level. Absolutely.
Beyonce.
Yeah. Well, thank you for keeping the tradition alive. This was awesome. Thank you for being on here. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure, man. I'm, obviously really appreciative of you and your role with the Whitecaps for all those years, and how much you meant to us. Great leader, great player, and good luck with LAFC and everything else you get into, like concerts and performing and all the things you're going to do after football as well. And Larry, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Steve. Thanks so much.
We'll see you at the
bank.
There you go. All right.
Take care.
Thanks, guys. See ya.